Thank you very much, Ms. Anne Caron. Anne is with us today to speak on the subject of Think You Have a Big Idea, Starting a Startup 101. We have seen in past decades, lawyers, engineers, doctors, these are some of the professions that not just in Asia, but in many regions around the world, tend to be viewed with a certain level of distinction, the preferred career pathways. But increasingly, we are seeing entrepreneurship as something that is seen in a positive light, not just among the younger generations, but also amongst those who have maybe served decades in a corporate career ladder and have now decided to come out and do their own thing. So, Anne, just to start off with your experience, you spent 10 years across several management roles at Google, mainly focusing on HR, focusing on talent. Although Google is a large multinational organization, what are some of the things that you have picked up on from your experience there that would actually also apply to startups?
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure being here with everyone today. Yeah, so the thing is, I spent 10 years at Google between 2005 and 2015, and to be honest, I kind of feel that it was two different companies, in between the two, because in 2005 we were 5,000 globally, in 2015 we were over 65,000, so it was quite a different company. But that's actually quite interesting to see how the company has grown and what made it a success, and how some of these things can be totally applied to a startup. And I think personally, one of the things that I really enjoyed the most in the organization, part of the culture, was the entrepreneurial spirit. And that was not just for the sake of saying, well, we're entrepreneurs and we're 60,000, but we're still a startup. That's really something that was lived and that I had the opportunity to do on a day-to-day. So very early stage, when I joined, I had the opportunity to build teams, to build new programs, to pilot new things that were not necessarily as part of my job description, but it's very much the thing of seeing a gap and filling it. And Google has been really good from early stage, but also as scaling to keep that spirit. And that's, for instance, a number of programs that Google is known for, like the 20% project that was started with the engineering teams, where engineers have 1 day per week that they can dedicate to a personal project, something that they want to develop. And we had very, great success out of that. I mean, Gmail was launched out of a personal project, and engineers that thought, oh, well, why don't develop, an internal mailing system? So I think, and the OKRs as well, that Google is famous for, is also leading to that, like pushing people to go above and beyond the day-to-day work. What are the other things that we can do to add the new initiatives that we can get started? So that's something that really fit well with me. I'm a doer. I love building things, so that was fantastic. And I think it's a must-have for startups, especially early stage, because obviously you don't expect employees to be sticking to the job description and not going beyond. You need people to be flexible and to be able to identify gaps and filling them. So to me, that was a big thing. I guess that the other two that I would highlight that are kind of quite well known is the strong culture that Google is known for. I think Google has been extremely good at building an employer brand and showcasing that we can build people-centric organizations and still be performing. And actually it goes hand in hand. So that is a strong personal belief as well. And I think that it's necessary when you want to get into an entrepreneurship journey to know that you need to build a strong culture. And the last thing was the hiring bar. So Google has always been very clear that in demanding on hiring, the top of the top. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be the top of the top for everyone, because otherwise that doesn't work, and we can't all have the same. But what is important is to know what you need and to be, not compromise, and be clear on that. And I think Google did quite a fair job on that.
Thank you. And you've mentioned company culture, you've mentioned this idea of being people-centric, and it's just lovely to see. I think, just yesterday I saw on LinkedIn this engineer who has just been accepted into a position at Google, and he put up a photo of his welcome pack where he was given a hoodie, he had this reusable bottle, things like that small touches that make you feel more welcome, the human touches.
Yeah, but this being said, I've been working with startups for quite some time, and as much as I think Google has done a great work on, showcasing that you can have people-centric culture and that investing in the culture is important, I do see a lot of founders that mix a little bit what you see and who you are, and having bean bags or football table, etc., won't create a culture. The culture is very much who you are and how you behave and how people experience working with you.
Definitely, always back to the human element of things.
Yeah.
So we started off our conversation by saying, many people in various stages of life, whether they've just completed their education, whether they are exiting a stable corporate career, they may perhaps be thinking about the flexibility as well as the financial freedom that being an entrepreneur and being the founder of a startup company that they will be able to enjoy. I'm sure, and the process isn't as easy as it seems. Many people online sell this big dream, be your own boss. Could you perhaps outline some of the top tips and maybe some of the traps as well that startup founders face?
Yeah, I think indeed a lot of people see the glamorous side of entrepreneurship. Some others actually see the other side also. They're like, ooh, that's too scary. I don't know if I can do it. But to me, so there are 4 things that are that you need to know when you get into an entrepreneurial journey. The first, you need to know yourself. Who are you? What do you want? And what do you want out of this? If it's to become rich, that might not be the easiest and the fastest way of getting there. And what are your strengths? What are you good at? What do you love doing? That's important to know that, because when we spoke about the company culture earlier, 80% of the culture comes from the founders. So you need to be clear about who you are and embrace it. You're not going to change overnight. So let's be clear about that. But most importantly, you're getting into something that's not going to be that easy. So you need to ensure that it's playing on your strength and you're going to like it. And that's the second thing to know also. Is you need to know about the journey. What are you getting into? Being an entrepreneur is taking time. It doesn't happen overnight, and actually you need to be ready to invest the next 10 years of your life into this, on average, right? So if it's shorter, most of the time is because it didn't work out. That's okay. You need also to be ready to fail. Some are very lucky and manage to get acquired before that, but usually the average would be 10 years. So be ready for that and know that what the path is going to be like, what are the different stages that you will have to go through. Which leads me actually to my third point, which is as a founder, your role is going to evolve quite significantly over time. So very early stage, as a founder, you need to be extremely hands-on, very resourceful. You're a doer. You're having multiple hats. I usually call it the jack of all trades stage. And so, yeah, resilience is important, being resourceful, hands-on, proactive, and all that. It's complicated because there's not everything, you don't know it all, but there's a certain level of satisfaction that you get out of it because you get things done. It's your baby, you really are into it. But that stage is actually not that long. Rather quickly, you need to move into a manager role because you're growing a team and this team needs to be managed. And in order to be a good manager, you need to grow new skills. Because if you're still hands-on, if you're still doing stuff for your team, that's not going to work. So the complexity in that journey is to be able to transition and grow the new skills and letting go the rest. So a lot of founders that I see fail to move to the manager role early enough and keep doing for their team. They're not letting go of the control. They struggle to empower their employees and delegate. And that really is, first, it's not scalable, and that becomes a danger for the business. And the last role is a leader role. And as a leader, your objective is on setting up the strategy, the vision, and communicating around that. You're not involved in operations anymore. And again, it's a totally different set of skills. And it's frustrating because that's your baby, you know how to do it, and you want to do it, and you feel that you're not as useful anymore. But you need to grow into that. So yeah, being aware of all these different skills that you will have to grow along the way is important, and those are not necessarily skills that you grow over time. And so the fourth thing that you need to have and to know is that you will need a trusted supporting team. Being a founder is extremely lonely. You're by yourself at the top of the organization, and you have a lot of pressure from inside, from outside, even from your own home. So it's very demanding and stressful. So getting this team together is very important to help you grow quicker and learn the skills. So the team I'm speaking about would be like trusted advisors, ensuring that you can find people who know, who are experts in areas that you don't necessarily master. You will have also some fellow founders. Build yourself a network of people who are going through the same journey, so you can share your experience and learn how they're dealing with it as well. You need to choose your investors wisely as well, because they will also be able to bring some insight to you, and you don't want your investors to be a burden. You really want them to be helpful. You can have an executive coach, especially to grow the skills that you don't have, and fill in this gap, or sometimes to identify blind spots. We don't know what we don't know, and so a coach can be good for that. And obviously loved ones, ensuring that you're close to your family, so that you can get comfort, and also you can get some resting time, so that you can also be good at work and make the best out of it. So that's the main thing.
Thank you, and so many key takeaway messages from your 4 main points there. I mean, I hear so many skills involved. The fact that the startup company, 80% of the culture comes from the founder. There's a need for leadership skills. There's the need for socio-emotional skills. You mentioned seeking out trusted advisors, mentors, building up a team. I hear also the need for resilience, the need for the ability to plan and sustain and survive at least an average 10-year journey. So there are a lot of skills that are required by startup founders, and certainly these are skills that our audience members will need to consider sharpening should they wish to dive into the startup journey.
Well, but you don't need to have it all. You need to be aware, just aware of the gaps, and be okay with the fact that you're going to multi-hat on all these functions and competencies at some point. But as you hire new people, hire where most of your time is being spent and not necessarily adding much value, and being okay for letting that go. You hire somebody better than you in that, so let them do their work and concentrate yourself in the next role.
So I guess it's having the adaptability to
Absolutely.
be picking up the new skills, or to be hiring people who have those skill sets.
Absolutely.
Right, and we have looked at startup founders, some of the skills that they need and the roles that they have to play in terms of the growth of the organization. If I may now just dive a bit into startups that have multiple founders. And there's always this saying where a founder or a group of founders have to be the ideators, the people who are the dreamers that come up with all the brilliant ideas. And then there has to be a fellow founder, a fellow group of founders who are the executors, the people that actually manage the operations and get those ideas running and ensure that those dreams are achieved. Do you agree with this? Or do you perhaps think that all founders should equally be able to ideate as well as they can execute?
No, I think a good founding team is a complementary team. So they need to be able to bring something different to the table whilst being able to work together and being reunited around the mission and the vision. So usually what I hear is mostly, so you need somebody that is more on the business side. So there will be more on the, selling the outside picture, and somebody that will be more usually on the tech side, the product side. But this being said, I mean, there are solo entrepreneurs, startups, and that works fine as long as they have the right supporting team, obviously. And you also have startups that have 4, 5, 6 co-founders. We have a number in the region. That's a bit more challenging, not necessarily at the beginning, because at the beginning, everybody is multitasking and multi-hatting, and that's fine. And actually, most of the time, you don't necessarily have titles for everyone. They're just helping hands. It becomes more complicated afterwards. When the company is growing, the organization is bigger, and therefore it becomes a bit harder to find a dedicated role to all of the co-founders. And what happens is usually they don't dare to have that conversation, but everybody knows and everybody sees that a specific co-founder or more than one co-founder is actually not really doing anything. Probably this co-founder is also feeling quite uncomfortable with this and wondering if they're adding any value or what their impact in that whole story. And so my advice here is, when you're setting up a startup as a co-founding team, no matter the size of the co-founding team, the discussion needs to be clear that at some point, the organization will outgrow our skills and our competencies. It will happen no matter what. And when that happens, we need to be able to have a conversation, a direct and honest conversation, and say, how do we scale the business, ensure the business can still grow and not be the bottleneck of that organization. And there could be some different options. It could be, okay, well, perhaps it's time for you to go, or it could be perhaps it's time for you to have a manager. So we hire somebody more senior than you, and you can learn the ropes from somebody more experienced and perhaps come back. We have actually CEOs that did that. The CEO at Google did that. They hired Larry Page and Sergey Brin. They hired Eric Schmidt for a time, and then Larry came back. Well, now he moved on again. But it's just about being sure that you can do what is necessary for the business and removing any ego and emotional conversation as much as possible. I mean, there's obviously all this is loaded with emotion, but trying to prepare for that as well. You know, again, preparation.
One of the main hurdles that startup founders face is in terms of funding, whether it be through incubator, accelerator programs, whether it be constantly pitching to potential investors. We see some television programs as well, like Dragon's Den and Shark Tank. What would be some key advice that you would give to startup founders in terms of success in the process of pitching for investment?
You need to know your skills. You need to know what you're good at least one person in the co-founding team needs to be comfortable getting out there, using the network, fighting for fundings. So if you're more naturally of an introvert, that's probably not going to be a role for you. You need to have a co-founder that is comfortable doing this. So know it. You don't want to be your business to depend on something that is really a pain in the ass for you to do. So that's the main thing. The second is, well, most probably, unless you're a serial entrepreneur, you've had previous experience doing this, it will be the first time for you to pitch. So getting advice from advisors, from previous founders, from investors is quite a good thing. Indeed, the accelerator programs could be a good option as well. They provide, it depends on the accelerator programs, but some accelerator programs provide quite detailed curriculum with coaching, with really pitch rehearsal and dry runs. And the result is usually really, really good. And you also get some great feedback. So it's more about, ensuring that one of you is naturally comfortable getting out there, because you'll need to, otherwise rethink your objective to another level. And second, try to get as much help as you can. And yes, accelerator programs are really good, as long as you're okay also to go through a certain path, right? You need to commit to the program.
Yep. So in summary, make sure you have the right skills, make sure you're the right person to do it. Otherwise, find someone who can. Get enough practice, get enough training, get lots of sound advice from investors even or mentors. Go through accelerator programs, incubator programs. These offer a lot of training in terms of pitching as part of the curriculum. And I guess be well prepared for the day itself. I mean, don't treat it as important as, for example, a job interview. So
no, for me, it's actually even more. So
more.
to do a good pitch, it's not like any type of presentation. So for a presentation, you might remember the bullet points and you know more or less what you're saying in each slide. For a pitch is usually, so we're speaking about a pitch in front of a demo day, right? A pitch. We're speaking about a short amount of time. So you have a short amount of time in order to really get an impact. So write down your script word by word to make sure that you use the right word each time. Otherwise, there will be for sure some I think that, or perhaps we will go inside your talk. So yeah, and rehearse. You need to know it by heart, at the comma, everything. Yeah. Right, so it's a lot of work, but the impact you can have is really worth it.
So, Anne, some people may also feel that in addition to all these skills, in order to succeed in this startup journey, you may require a certain amount of funding, a certain level of professional network around you that you can tap from, such as good mentors, advisors that you mentioned earlier. And many who are, let's say, just graduating from a degree perhaps, would feel that this is something you can only gain from having decades of working in corporates. What are your thoughts on this?
So let me perhaps clarify what is the difference, according to me, between an entrepreneur and a startup founder. Because an entrepreneur could be a freelance, it could be the CEO of an SME that is just remaining at 10 employees or 3 employees for forever. So the main difference happens when you're going into a startup. A startup is defined mostly by the pace and the scale. So things happen very quickly. So unless you want to go for a startup, so go for speed and scalability, you don't necessarily need funding. You can go into being an entrepreneur in a small structure with not necessarily high, extreme ambition, and do without funding. The funding becomes necessary from the moment you need to accelerate a lot. In terms of the mentoring and the network, we spoke about that. For me, that's absolutely critical. Again, you don't know what you don't know, so you need a team around you to help you see what you don't see, tell you what you don't want to hear, and be able to, to learn and grow from there. When it comes to working experience, I think it's a plus, but not a must. As I said, in your entrepreneurship journey, there's a lot that you will have to do that you have never done before. So perhaps there will be even more if you have never worked before. But actually, having previous working experience can also be a constraint, because it gives you a sense of how it should be, whereas when you're setting up a new company, when you're setting up even more your company, you need to rethink and look for new models. And so some founders who have had previous work experience, and especially in conventional corporate organization, tend to find it difficult to evolve and adapt to a startup setup. So those 3 things kind of, they're important. But the one thing to know is, in order to set up a successful organization, you need 4 things. So there are 4 things that you need to be successful and scale your startup properly. First, you need a product that people want to buy, or a service that people want to buy. You need to be able to generate revenues. You need capital, indeed, if you want to scale fast. And you need an organization, basically people to be able to do what you want to do. But the reality is that most of the founders focus most of their attention on the first 3 and spend very little time thinking, let alone doing anything about the organization itself, how to prepare the organization. And the thing is that companies are made of people, and people can make or break your company. And performance happens with people, not on paper. So whatever is in your business plan, it might look good on paper. Unless you have the right people at the right time to deliver and execute your business plan, it won't happen. So the organization is really important to also add in the things that you need to have a successful startup.
That's very true. A lot of the time, I think a business plan, it consists of numbers in terms of, break-even points, profit margins. It consists of the values, the ideas, the product development. But often neglected are the people who need to fill these different roles, the skills that they will need. Sometimes even the professional development, the training, the coaching that needs to be devoted to these people as well.
Yep. Hence the importance of a good having good managers. So first as a founder and then hiring good managers.
So, Anne, since you left Google, you've been running your own consulting firm for 5 years now. You've worked with many startups, some very successful ones as well, especially in the Southeast Asia region, Gojek and Zilingo being just two examples. What are your tips for success in terms of the scaling aspect of a startup company?
Yep. So let me start with the most common pitfall that I see with startups, and that's true in Southeast Asia, but that's actually true globally across the board. The main pitfall that I'm seeing is that startups fail to build the organization on time, to come back to what I was just saying earlier, and to plan ahead of the hypergrowth phase. They really underestimate how difficult it is to go through the hypergrowth phase. Hypergrowth usually happens around Series B, Series A, Series B. So you get a significant amount of money, and you have proved that the product worked well, that you have a business model that people trust, and the investors are basically telling you, now we trust you, go ahead, scale, expand, and go big. And so what that means that you need to hire a lot of people. And so very quickly, when you get into that phase, the organizations start to lag behind the business needs. So you need to do more than what people can actually execute. And so that's okay as long as you're growing at a reasonable scale. But from the moment you hit hypergrowth, all the challenges come at once. And so all of a sudden you need to hire a lot of people, therefore you need to have recruiters, therefore you need to have an employer brand, and you need to have trainings, onboarding. Oh, and you need managers. We have people, so we need managers. Oh, and we need to rethink the different systems. So a lot of things happen at once, and that it also is the time that you have a lot of things to deliver at the business side. So it's difficult to change the wheels as you're driving, which is very much what happens for most of the company. So that's the main pitfall. Now, the main challenge is that no one is owning the organization. It's not really a thing. People's strategy or organizational design is not really a function. So the closest that you can think of is HR. But the first HR person that you hire is going to be doing mostly admin and operational stuff, which is mostly what people assimilate to HR. So nobody is really thinking about the people strategy or the organization design. And that's something that needs to be owned by someone. And so in that case, it has to be the founders. Now, what I suggest startups to do, what is necessary to do, is to do this planning. So having a strategy, so basically a strategy is to think, okay, what do we need to do, and to build a plan for that. So the first step is to build the strategy, and the strategy comes from two elements, the mission and the vision that will define your business strategy, and the values. And all this together will get you into the people strategy. It defines what is it that we do, where are we going, and how are we doing it. And once you have that, then you can build your plan, and I call it an organization roadmap, the same way that you have a product roadmap that details the different steps of building your product. You need an organization roadmap to detail how you're going to build the organization, what are the capabilities that you need at what moment, etc., to ensure that when you're opening up a new office or launching a new product, you have the right team in place to deliver it, as opposed to realizing you're going to launch your products like, oh, we don't have the customer service team in place to answer our clients. How do we do? And then you're like, oh, we need to hire a lot of customer service. Oh yeah, but we don't have recruiters. Oh, we need to hire recruiters. And so if you add up all that, easily needs 6 months to plan in advance, to get, to know how many recruiters you need to hire recruiters, to get your recruiting thing in place, to recruit your customer service people, to train them, and then being able to get them able to deliver. So planning is important.
Okay, so you have touched on the importance of planning as well as some of the aspects that surround it. But if we look at the world as it currently stands, post-pandemic, this whole idea of VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, as well as just the rapid pace in which technology is accelerating at. What is your opinion? I mean, you mentioned maybe a 6-month plan, at least in the example that you gave. What is your opinion on startups in terms of their preparations, having to continuously experiment, continuously pivot based on market demands and needs? Should a startup company's experimentation focus on their values? A particular set of goals, or should it be focusing on succeeding as a business?
That's a very good question. So I would say there's a time for pivoting. It's almost impossible not to pivot. I have seen almost no startup that had an idea, and 3 years later, they were implementing that exact idea that they had at the beginning. So usually the first 6 months to 1 year is very much about going to the market and checking if there is a demand, and then adapting to that. And so most of the time you need to pivot, which is also why, as a founder, you need to be clear and flexible, that it will change and not be too married to your idea. So pivoting is absolutely necessary at the beginning to ensure that you're developing the right product for the right audience. Now, when this is done, that's when you get into, you become clear and say, okay, now I understand the right product for this segment of the population is this. We nailed it. At that point, then that's when you define your mission and your vision. And that should stay forever. That's not, that's not something, that's not a mission is not an annual objective. It's your motto for the length of your organization. And I can give a counter example here, for instance. A company, a famous tech company that had 23 mission statements in 21 years. So you can imagine what that meant. They kept on changing their strategy, trying to run after the competition and then changing. This company is Yahoo. And so if you think about it now, it's true that they were successful at some point, and then they kept on changing the strategy over time and trying to run after the Google, perhaps the Facebook, etc. And so that's very difficult for customers to know exactly what is it that they're trying to do. But imagine for employees, it's even worse. It's like, what are we trying to achieve? So there's a time for pivoting. That's at the beginning, and then you set your vessel on the course and for a direction, and you're trying to stick to it.
So if I may just summarize, lay the grounds for the product that it's gonna work, or the service based on the market research, the market demands, and then stick to your set of vision and mission.
Yeah. The strategy may change slightly over time, right? To adapt to the different situations. Obviously, a lot of companies had to change their strategy with the current COVID pandemic, but it doesn't mean that they changed their vision. They didn't change all of a sudden what problem they were trying to solve, and what was the moonshot that they had set themselves.
So when we talk about, sticking to a set of vision and mission, and the products and services always being innovative and catering to market needs, I mean, we see a lot of these products and services and a lot of startups mushrooming that are seemingly doing the same thing. They claim to have certain USPs, unique selling points, but upon closer inspection, maybe they're sometimes just picking ideas that they saw from halfway across the world and adapting it to their localized market. Um, would you agree that perhaps there should be a greater deal of collaboration involved between these different startups? Or would you say that it's fine to take something and innovate it for your own local needs?
I'm actually fine with that. I think it has been working well and it has been necessary. It's not because it's not fully innovative that it's not needed in the markets in which we operate. I mean, some of the great unicorns in the region have done exactly this model, whether that's Grab, Gojek, even Traveloka. They took a system, a product that already existed in the market and made it very successful in here. So that's fine. For me, innovation, it depends the definition of innovation. But if innovation is about trying to fill a gap or to find a smarter way to do something. And so if there is a gap, let's just fill it and we don't have to reinvent the wheel for it. Now, when it comes to collaboration, it doesn't, when it comes to Grab, for instance, they ended up collaborating with Uber, right? They were, so collaboration could be part of the strategy and it's just about, what makes the most sense at that point. But most importantly, I think that what matters is not whether you're really doing something totally new, and it's about, are you doing something that is meaningful to you? So again, I'm getting it back to the core of the question, which is, why are you doing this? And what exactly do you want to get out of it? And is it allowing you to be yourself? That's what will allow you to be consistent in what you do and to procure some pleasure, which is quite important, knowing that you're going to spend at least 10 years on it.
That's definitely very true. And I think, we look at a lot of startup founders who, quit their jobs because they want to do something that they're passionate about. And you mentioned doing something that's meaningful, something that can help others around you. So I guess this serves also as motivation to our audience members out there. You need not be the next Einstein. You need not come up with something that has to be a completely innovative idea. I mean, it's great if you have one, but don't let the lack of an innovative idea stop you from, as Anne said, if there's a gap in the market to be filled, if you see something within the communities, the society around you that needs to be fixed, that's an opportunity for a startup.
Yep.
So Anne, following up on all our previous conversations, what do you see as the meaning of success? How do you define success for a startup? Or perhaps you feel that success is part of going through that 10-year journey rather than achieving, let's say, a magic number in terms of finances. And also, just to add to that, is that journey about having a finish line? Some startups aim for a merger, some startups aim to be acquired by larger organizations. And I guess the summary of this entire question is, what is sustainability to startups? How can startups be more sustainable?
Yeah. That's a very good question. For me, there are two different things. One is, what is your personal goal as a founder? What do you want to get out of it? Again, is it that you want to get rich? Is it that you want to be famous? Is it that you want to solve a problem? It could be all three. But that's a personal goal, and you need to ensure that the journey that you're going through will lead you there. Otherwise, it will be frustrating no matter what you end up doing. But when it comes to the sustainability of the business, it's the vision. You know, so what do you say? What is your moonshot? And most of the time, it's because it's a moonshot. It's difficult to go to, but it needs to be clear to everyone where we're trying to go, and to set, you know, to be inspiring. My all-time favorite vision statement came from Microsoft. It was a computer on every desk and in every home. It was over 30 years ago, I think, 40 years ago. And you know, that's what I find inspiring. And at the time, they were not, you know, they were only just starting to build computers, Microsoft. But it was extremely descriptive. You could see what it means. And it was really crazy at the time to think that we could have computers everywhere. And here we are. But you know, when you have a vision that is strong, that is meaningful to you, you know what you're doing it and what it will bring to the world, then it's easy to get people to follow you, to potentially identify collaboration, etc. So yes, the vision has exactly this, this focus, this objective of sustainability, keeping the direction.
Thank you, Anne. And in your experience, you know, having worked with numerous startups and essentially starting your own business as well, your consulting firm that I mentioned earlier, if you had free reign, and you know, I'm sure you're a person with many ideas floating around. If you had free reign, you had sufficient funding, you had, you know, adequate technical knowledge in terms of building a team to support you as well. What would you say is a startup that you would want to create? What would be the startup that has the greatest potential in the current climate?
Yeah. So perhaps not that I would create, to be honest, because I know myself and I know I don't want to be a CEO. I'm very happy with, you know, being a consultant and an advisor, and so that's for sure. However, what I would love to see is, it's a busy space, but it's a needed space. It's education, you know, more innovation, but true innovation in education. I think we have all seen how, you know, behind the needs most of our education systems are. With the pandemic, it has really been putting some light on the gaps that we have here. And I think we just need to think bigger. A lot of the startups I'm seeing in that space are taking one little piece and, you know, like making some surveys for the children to be able to assess themselves online. Okay, good enough. But what about like really rethinking the whole learning system and the so I think that would be very needed. And yeah, that's for me one. And if I tweak a little bit your question, if I had the possibility to reallocate the funding somewhere, I would probably allocate it to areas where we have founders from minority backgrounds, or even just you know, more diverse background. If I just take, which is not a minority because it's half of the population, but the female founders, we really have very, very little female founders. And those who are female founders struggle to get investors. For a good reason, investors are mostly male. And when female are trying to have a startup that's trying to solve female problems, because that's what they know about, and there are some female problems to solve, investors don't really follow. And we're seeing that most investors that invest in female-funded startups are female investors. And that makes sense. I mean, it's true that if you have a startup in India that try to solve the problem around female having periods, it's normal that normal. I don't know, but it's natural that male founders would feel uncomfortable, probably, and unmanageable about the subject. So I would put more funding in the diverse investors to be able to get into the diverse ideas which are absolutely necessary.
Certainly, we have seen a lot of talk around inclusion and diversity in so many of our speaker sessions across all 5 days of the conference. And this is just another example. There is still, unfortunately, inequality in terms of how funding is generated, how funding is shared and allocated to all these different startups and even entrepreneurs in general beyond the startup realm. And that is something certainly that we'll be exploring as well with some of our other speakers. Now, Anne, you recently, and I must congratulate you for this, launched your book From Zero to 1000. That's the title. Could you perhaps give our audience members a preview into what the book is about and how they can enrich themselves from reading it?
Yeah, sure. So I actually got to write this book from my 5 years experience working with founders, and what I was mentioning before, the fact that most of founders didn't really prepare for the journey, and we're getting into that hyper growth and not really knowing what to do. So the idea was really to put together a playbook for founders on how to set yourself for success and build the right organization to execute your business plan. So basically in the book, I go through the different stages of a startup from 0 to 1,000 people. What is the journey of a founder and the different skills that you need to grow, and also how to build a sustainable and positive culture, how to build a people function, how to build performance management frameworks, and how to build the organization roadmap. So that's the highly practical level of how to.
Okay, and finally, Anne, I asked this same question to all the speakers whom I interview. How do you see yourself innovating and provoking mindset change in your area of expertise within the next 12 months or so?
Yeah, so I might not innovate a lot, but what I want to do even more, and that I already started to do at the beginning of the year, is to spend more time with founders, advising and educating them on the necessity to think about the people strategy. And so basically, I see myself more as a facilitator of innovation than actually innovating myself. But yeah, for me, the most important, my goal is to get people strategy as one of the major topics, the same way that you would think about your marketing strategy, your go-to-market strategy. There is a people strategy that needs to be dealt with and owned from the beginning in the organization. It doesn't take much time, but it does take some thinking. And so that's what I'm concentrating my time on for the next 12 months.
Definitely, and I think it's important for startup founders and those within the audience who intend to venture onto that pathway as well to realize that many startup founders jump into this journey without adequate support, maybe without even a mentor to advise them. There are plenty of people out there, I'm sure, who would be able to offer very sound advice. Anne is one of them with a world-class experience and expertise. If you have any questions for her, please feel free to reach out. We have our AdSpace Inspired Community app. There are other sources as well. You can even use the Google form right below this video to reach out to her. And of course, contact details for her consultancy is also provided below the video, as is a link to purchase her book, available both as a paperback as well as an ebook version. Right, so thank you very much, Anne. So much sound advice for current as well as hopefully many future budding startup entrepreneurs from our audience members. And once again, Anne, it's been a great pleasure to have you at our Inspired conference. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for your sound advices. Thank you for your sound advice. And again, to audience members, feel free to reach out to Anne, whether through the AdSpace app, the contact forms, read her book. I mean, that's the first step to growing from 0 to 1,000.
Yes. Thank you very much for having me. A real pleasure, and I can't wait to hear the questions.